At this time, I would also like to express our gratitude to the Albanukun Library and Gallery, the co-sponsor of this event. The Albanukun Gallery is supported in part by the Maryland State Arts Council, an agency funded by the state of Maryland and the National Endowment for the Arts, the Friends of the Library and Gallery, the Libby Kuhn Endowment Fund, and individual contributors. It is my pleasure to introduce to you tonight's speaker, Corazon del Sol. Corazon is the daughter of Eugenia Butler, the conceptual artist who conceived of the Book of Lies. She is also a practicing artist and curator in her own right. Please join me in welcoming Corazon.
So, because there's not that many people and the nature of the book is a very tactile experience, and I brought the books from California. I'd love it if we could find a way to sit around the books and actually use them during the conversation. That's okay with everybody? Come close. This is going to be a different kind of a lecture. Here you go, sir. The concepts of the book are many. And actually, in kind of preparing for this talk, there was 10 boxes of archives that I've never looked at. And I know the book intimately, and obviously I was around when my mom was doing it, and I had to show it quite a lot. So I feel really intimate with it, but in going through the archives, I found so much stuff I never knew that's given it a completely different stance for me, which is amazing. So part of the book is, the idea of the book is the territory of truth and lies. It holds us in a holding pattern, culturally, like trying to, every single second of the day is a negotiation with truth and lies, especially in a culture that's so embedded in lies. Historically, it's embedded in lies. Our identity, every kind of norm that this is a concept of my mom's. I'm not saying it's true, but every norm, every vision of ourselves, every vision of the world are all constructs that we've kind of inherited from different cultural, either from colonization or from capitalism or from economy, or everything has, or from real kind of handed down generation to generation. So the navigation of what's real and who are we and what's our authentic experience in the day it's complex, and it takes up so much of our brain power. And the idea of the books is to throw our kind of our compasses off in a way, so intuition can come in. And part of what I found when I was going through the archives is my mom researched shamanism a lot and magic. She went to UC Berkeley in the 60s. In 1968, she was there for the riots, and she was studying under Jim Butler. And she was really deeply embedded in the kind of the conceptual art movement. She was already showing in some of the first conceptual shows in the world, like in Leverkusen and Conception. And what was happening, obviously, was the idea of the dematerialization of art. And so for her, the next step of dematerialization was invisibility and researching invisibility. And she asked her teacher in 1968, I think it was, or 1969, if she could take the year off and study invisibility and get straight A's. And he said yes at Berkeley. So she did. She researched invisibility, and it went into kind of this other edge of because for her, art making was just the urge to touch the unformed parts of our psyche, the unformed parts of our understanding. And so for her, she started to go deeper and deeper into that part. Like, 'cause shamanism does that. It goes into these arenas of our psyche, of the parts of the psyche that don't already have names, or don't already have boundaries, or don't already have pre-made constructs. And so through that, you can have a little bit more freedom to touch the viewer. So the books actually come out of that. And what I found in the archives was that she saw the books as labyrinths, as conceptual labyrinths that you go through, and piece by piece, artist by artist, you navigate through a playfulness and a conversation about truth and lies. And the biggest artist in the experience is the viewer. So actually viewing the books is really an important element touching the books is a really important element to the whole experience, because you as the viewer becomes the main participant of the artwork in kind of getting to they destabilize what truth and lies are for the period of time that you're working with the book. And hopefully the idea is that new ideas come. New ideas will come today, tomorrow, in a month, in a year, and those are the real artworks. So, I don't know. I'll start, let me see how to start. This is book 1. And I can do the slides. I prefer just to talk to you guys. I don't know, what would you rather? Okay.
You're in charge.
Okay, so Eugenia the history is important because her father was an Irish immigrant from Tipperary who came and fought in the war and got the GI Bill, and went to Georgetown and became a really successful litigation lawyer. And his whole life was about kind of the David and Goliath story. He was the first to do thalidomide. He was the first lawyer to sue a pharmaceutical company. He was the first lawyer to sue an airline company. So externally, there was this story of the small man bringing out the truth and going up against the big guns. Internally, he was a horrible person. Privately, he was a very abusive man, just really strangely destructive person. And he had a huge shadow over her whole life. And then there was the story of her mother, who was Irish Welsh, 3rd generation from America, 2nd generation from California. And she was a sergeant in the military as well, sergeant nurse. That's where she met my grandfather. They fell in love. And as soon as he started making money, she became, which was sort of a classic story, became interested in the arts because she had leisure time. And through that, they moved to Los Angeles from Washington, and she was part of the group of women that go to the studios and meet the artists, and she'd start to create shows and work with the museum. And then she decided to start her own gallery. And in starting her own gallery, her dream was to be an artist, but she was Irish Catholic, middle class, and wasn't allowed. It wasn't an option at that time for women to become artists, really. There's all these stories. There's another woman who was close with my grandmother and my mom, and now with me, who I actually collaborate with, named Barbara Smith, an amazing artist. And she her byline is the radicalization of a housewife. She lived in Pasadena, lived in like a really lavish green home, upper class, decided to start making art, and she did these really intense performances, naked a lot of the time, about being sort of enclosed in the system. And the husband used the performances in court to take the children, which wasn't that unheard of at the time. So there's this strange time in the 50s and the 60s where it's becoming really radical, but still the norms are very conservative, especially as a woman. And so my grandmother wanted to be an artist. The closest thing she could do is start this really far out gallery. And it's known as one of the kind of most far out experimental galleries in the country at that time, the Eugenia Butler Gallery. I'll say name is my mom. And it was the first gallery to show conceptual work. A lot of she was the first for James Lee Byers. I don't know, are you guys familiar with conceptual artists? No? So the conceptual art movement comes out of, really out of, there's a lot to explain. But it's the idea that it's Marcel Duchamp, and it's the idea that art symbolizing ideas with artworks, we're moving beyond it. You know, there's realism and there's impressionism, and then our eyes and our kind of aesthetic becomes more and more refined until what we're really searching for are the deepest parts. They're the ideas. And so conceptual art takes you to the place and uses ideas as the artwork instead of the objects as the artwork. And so my grandmother had this gallery, and she had the funding from my grandfather and was the first to show all of this amazing conceptual work that, if you're familiar with it, is the kind of who's who of conceptual art. So she's really celebrated in those circles. So that's what my mom grew up with. My mom grew up with an open door and a house full of these artists, constantly there, living there, having conversations. Just that was her world, and it was the world of ideas. It was so exciting. And the world of ideas and the search for truth. And she had that on the one hand, and then on the other hand, she had the inside of the family, the inner workings was this like really high level of abuse. And so as an artist, and as a human being, she's trying to navigate constantly what is real and what's fake, what's truth and what's a lie. Like, on the one hand, I have this super avant-garde lifestyle, full of artists and full of truth. And I'm living in California on the West Coast. It's supposed to be the furthest kind of frontier of ideas, and it's really conservative as well. I mean, so there's all of these paradoxes. So her life's work is grappling with the ideas of truth and lies. And so it brings her to, let's see, let me try and figure out what I have all my slides set up, but she goes to South America, she studies shamanism. I'm raised in South America. She comes back and she starts to be an artist in Los Angeles. And it's very competitive, it's very art marketplace. And she decides to leave and go to Europe. She gets invited to Dusseldorf in the early 90s. And in Dusseldorf, I forget who isn't the prime minister, but it's socialist. And they have these huge buildings for artists. Thank you. Okay, yeah, maybe just to give you guys some context. So, let's see. That's my grandmother, Eugenia Butler. That's in 1965. You can see she's like, for 1965, she's pretty liberated. Smoking and drinking, and you know, like one of the most famous shows in the gallery was an artist named Dieter Roth, who's considered kind of one of the grandfathers of conceptual art. And he did a show where he brought 31 suitcases and they filled them with cheese. And it was in August, so it's really hot in LA. And day by day, they opened each suitcase up. And it became full of maggots and full of flies. And the health department tried to shut it down. And my grandfather, being a lawyer, convinced them that it was imperative to the artwork and that they had to leave the gallery open. I think 30 people saw the show. And now it's one of the most famous shows in art history. And it's interesting because that's also about the fetishization of art, where now you have all of these people who say, oh, it was genius, and I was there, and it was so amazing, but it was too far out at the time. People didn't get, how can rotting in cheese and flies and maggots be an artwork? But in fact, he was commenting on so many, but one of his big comments was on the art world and fetishization of art was a lot of what that piece was about. So that's one of the most famous pieces that was shown at the gallery. There's my mom right there with the polka dot shirt on at a typical art party in LA in the 60s. There's the gallery. And it's interesting because a couple years ago I did a show for the Getty Museum on the gallery. And I had to go and interview all of the artists. And it was so interesting because they talked about how at the time it was just them. They had no support. They had nobody to talk to about these ideas. It was just them at the gallery having these discussions about, if art isn't a picture, if art isn't an object, what can it be? What are we trying to do? And they would just be in that small space talking to each other. And out of that ability to have a space for conversation, a space to take risks, came a big movement in the, that now if you go to art school now, like, those are the heroes, and they weren't hugely intellectual. They weren't rarefied. They were just people. Some of them taking lots of drugs. Some of them kind of crazy. People just willing to take these risks. And there wasn't an art world in LA. It wasn't like New York. So they were able to take these risks. And it was the risk taking that created this amazing art. So this is a piece that my mom did called The Kitchen Table. And in 1991, she goes to Germany, to Dusseldorf, and she's introduced to this whole group of artists that were students of an artist named Joseph Beuys. I don't know if you know who he is. So he at the time had taken the baton from Marcel Duchamp. He was very politically active, doing pieces. One of his famous pieces was he sat in a gallery with a coyote for 1 week. Like pieces that wouldn't on the surface seem to be art, but they're more about just grappling with the question of what it is to be a human being on the planet if we're not these automatons to make money and have these kind of formatted lives. What are we? And so when she went to Germany, she became really close to a group of his students. And the students, in LA, the atmosphere is very competitive. You have a certain amount of galleries, a certain amount of museums. It's dictated by rich collectors. And even though she had an entree into that world, it was frustrating. She went to Germany, and this group of artists had started their own museum called the Paul Pelosa Museum. And it was an artist-run museum. They took over a train station, and they were so supportive of each other. They put on these huge installations, one artist every month, working together completely collaboratively, and it blew her away. It was like everything that she'd kind of dreamed of and never experienced. And it marked her as an artist. Like after 1991, her art changed. And the first thing she did when she came back was did this conversations called the kitchen table. And I'm going to read a quote. That she sent out to the people that were going to be in the kitchen table. Good works of art create matrices of information, visual and otherwise, that change us almost like a benevolent virus. That as we experience them, our mental processes are affected and altered, even if it is subliminal, vestigial. In the kitchen table, it is best to allow the entire group to go into what I call primary thinking, speaking new thoughts and ideas that have not yet been expressed previously, that emerge from the chemistry of the experience. So what she's starting to do is do these large-scale sculptures. And on the surface, people would be like, you're having a meal with other artists. How is this a sculpture? But what she was proposing was, no, this is actually a sculpture because the ideas that are created in the conversation are sculptural. And particularly in this case, it was in the middle of the art fair, LA Art Fair. There was a secret room, and she invited her favorite artists from around the world. So in each meal, there was 7 people, between 4 and 7 people, and there was, I think, 6 meals. And they transmitted them throughout the art fair. So also you had the information actually being inserted around this large space where there was the commercial art fair happening. So that was also an element of the sculptural aspect. Does that make sense? So I'm going to play a piece. This is an artist, Marina Abramovich. I don't know if you guys know who she is. My mom, Alan Graham, and I'm not sure if Alan Capro's in this one or the next one. So I'll play.
The progress is regress, from my point of view. I hate progress. I hate technology because it's just like, it really makes us invalids. They cut everything out.
Not necessarily.
It does. I mean, it's not supposed to do because supposedly with technology we have more time for ourselves, but it doesn't.
But it depends on how I think it depends on how we coexist on it, how we live with it. I mean, we have
badly with this because tell me, you spent 4 years with me to learn how to function a computer, but you will not spend 4 years to
You came from Amsterdam to Los Angeles in one day.
technology, okay, but
I agree. I mean, I hear myself when I hear you talk. Yes. I mean, I hear myself. I mean, I rail against television. I rail against a lot of it. But the truth is that these are tools, and that
It's the same. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's what the
it's
intent.
what our consciousness is. What our intent is.
I'm for telepathy against telephone.
Telepathy against television?
Telephone.
Oh, well, absolutely.
But how much time you spend to learn telepathy? It's possible to learn telepathy. It's not something
That's one thing off the grid.
Yeah.
Off the grid.
Yeah, it's great.
It is, but absolutely, but it exists. I mean,
This is a verse of that. Using telepathy to communicate.
but we all do it.
No, and it happens. And
It happens. We do it all the time. No one can ever tell you a lie because you always know if someone is telling you a lie. There is some place in your body that you know when you're being lied to, and it's only the adaptations, the refusal, the denial of information that stops us from knowing. I mean, there's also this wonderful telepathic system of trees. I mean, you can. I've read about. I actually found this out when I was a child, but I've read about it in primitive cultures, where you can send information to anyone through a tree. You can talk to a tree.
No, but we do this. We don't do this. We do this. Come on. The mind is, we have to change everything. The complete school education. I mean, we just don't rely on our body and mind powers.
One of the places we start, I think, is we start in our own field. I mean, to me, that's one of the most horrendous things about what you're telling me is that this denial of the sublime is happening in art.
which is supposed to be the,
You know, I mean, that is the most frightening factor.
well, then where's, you know, I mean, then what function, you know, I mean, taking that art is to serve, that art serves a function. It serves a function in an area that other things don't function as well. You know, I mean, that this is, and it's a connective function with things bringing and bringing meaning forward and making the world, you know, it's like the ritual. I mean, you constantly have to go back and start over again. You constantly have to bring it up fresh. You have to keep regenerating. You have to keep regenerating.
I just got it.
That's what this repetition I'm talking about.
Yes, that's what
Repetition is a great power.
but the notion of purpose, technology, nothing necessarily is the villain. Granted, it takes away from abilities that we would normally use or be forced to use in other ways, but it seems that
Because lazy.
it makes you lazy only if you really want to be lazy. I mean, it allows you to trash. It allows you to do things. It's where your value system. I mean, you have a world value system. The value system can use things one way or another. We can use things. We can use our time. There's choice, constant choice, you know, as to where you choose to be. I mean, because we're privileged in the sense that we have that ability. There's a lot of choices that we have that a lot of other people may not have. But to use that choice is really what it comes down to. I mean, the technology is like, what is a computer used for? I mean, John Cage Roly Holy Over, you know, which I just found, you know, like a joyous thing to go into. I loved this, you know, the feeling that came off of this, and you know, here are all these computer programs of John Cage's. Here are all these systems that he goes around that he doesn't use, that he does use. All of these choices, all of this moving in and out that's happening, you know, every day within the changing of the format of this show, was utilizing it in a way and giving a freshness to it. It wasn't deadening my senses. You know, he was using it in a different way. He was coming at it from a different.
But he also said the choice with the I Ching, you know, the choice he liked the less is the choice he learned the most. That's really beautiful. And the second thing about his life, what I like very much, his life was completely structured. He had at least 3 hours a day to water all his cactuses in the studio. He did an enormous amount of work, you know, it was very complicated. Then about 4 hours he spent on making macrobiota food. Then another 4 hours he spent, you know, playing the chess. So everything was like in time plan, and art was random. It's perfect. It's really nice.
Yeah, it is, that's right.
So, I don't know if you can sense it, but it's the attempt to what happens when people go into a situation without the need to know, without using their frontal cortexes, that maybe we can find new territory, new real estate, and out of that new territory is where we will create new worlds. Because out of the old territories, we keep replicating the same worlds. I mean, at the end of the day, my mom was an activist, a feminine activist, hoping that we would find our way out of this kind of morass that we're in. And her belief was that we could do it if we went, even if it was 1 minute, 1 week, we allowed ourselves to come into the place of not knowing. We allowed ourselves to be on shaky ground. We allowed ourselves to be in touch with all of our fears that debilitate us otherwise. And those are the places that if we do them alone and together, little by little we'll create these mini revolutions. Little by little we'll create this other territory that is something new and something our own. And out of that hopefully comes change. So after that project, she came and she did, let's see, what's the next picture? Okay, so then after that project is the Book of Lies. She did that in 1991, I think, and the book started in 1993, and it was her next attempt at doing these collaborative pieces. And what she would do is she would ask between 20 and 30 artists to make objects, handmade objects, 80 pieces. So each artist would make 80 artworks. And there'd be between 20 and 30 artists in each book. And each artist would get a book. So in a way as well, it served to become a conversation. You knew that you were doing it, A, for Eugenia, who you loved. Most of the artists knew her or loved her in some way. And B, for this other group of your peers who you knew or respected. And so it took the act of art making out of the marketplace for a minute, where it's just these kind of, it's a gift economy suddenly. And so you get these works where artists spent incredibly, like, a lot of them are really time-consuming pieces that they did, and you're like, why did they do 80 pieces? I mean, like, I think about having, I did one piece with my mom, but it was a lot of time, and you're like, but it's a labor of love, which I think gives the book such a sense of beauty and poetry that you don't find in a lot of artworks. So this is the first one. And you can see it's like really primitive. Like my mom and her friends just stayed in her studio, like folding paper and doing everything by hand. And she would always have it be a mix of poetry and writing, like literature or prose, and artworks.
How many copies were made?
80 of each book. I don't know exactly how to do it, but I want you guys to touch the works. That's the really important part. You know, I think it's okay. I use these as show copies, so, and it's important to me not to be. I actually didn't know how much the books were worth until like last week. Someone told me, and I was like, oh my god! I'm just like I like knocked them around. And
How much are they worth?
It said $22,000, but who knows?
For each or for the set?
The set. But I know that it's not intended to be fetishized. It's intended to be touched and used, and if they get destroyed, that's okay. So, yeah, but I mean, yeah. So Adolf Lichtenberg, he was part of the Dusseldorf movement, and he was a student of Joseph Beuys's, and he works, it's very conceptual, very simple, it's just light, but hopefully it takes you out of your mindset for one moment when you see the glimmer.
By the way, we have here on campus, supported by the Joseph Beuys Foundation,
Oh.
the Joseph Beuys Tree Park.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Wait, so what's displayed in the gallery? Is this another copy of the book?
This is all framed pieces of the book.
The same book.
The same books. Let's see, I'll go through and just show you some of my favorite ones. This is my mom for the first book, and it's interactive, and it's made as an artwork to hang in your window. And it says lielessness. And it's supposed to be the moon and the reflection of the moon, which is that a lie or is it truth because it's reflected light. This is a piece I really love. Penelope Lee. She's an Australian artist, and she was living in Tokyo at the time. And it's interesting because in going through the archives this time, I found out so much stuff I didn't know, but I found all of the correspondence of the artists being introduced to each other. So it was really this kind of network of artists around the world that would say, oh, do you know my friend Penelope? Like this, an artist in Mexico wrote my mom and said, oh, Penelope Lee's amazing, you should write to her. And so then she wrote Penelope, and Penelope sent her to somebody else. But Penelope's piece is, when she was living in Tokyo, she was on a residency. She, as you know, everyone would wear these masks, but without the lips. And so every day she committed to memory one pair of lips that weren't covered, and she would go home and embroider one of the masks with it. So there's 80 different embroidered lips in all of the books. This is a funny one. We don't need to touch it though. It's Ed Culver. You can see the hand is huge. He's a goth punk photographer. He's pretty well known in LA. He did a lot of like the Germs and early like 70s punk rock. And he was our neighbor. And he drove a Hertz. He dressed in all black. He was like very goth and like grumpy all the time. And he was constantly fighting with his girlfriend, Virginia, who was an artist. And finally, and they were always breaking up and getting back together. And finally, they had their final breakup at the time of the book. And so he burnt all her love letters and made a print with his hand of the love letters and poked a finger and put a piece of his blood and like signed it for Virginia. So I think it's a funny piece because I know him.
What is his last name again?
Culver, Ed Culver. Yeah, he's pretty famous. This is an artist, Kim Jones, who was an LA artist, but now lives in Australia. And a lot of these artists were just cult heroes. They were artists. They weren't marketplace artists. And over time, some of them have become marketplace artists. But he's interesting. He was a Vietnam veteran, and he had a character named Mudman that he would use as a performance. He created this mud character, just full of mud and twigs and sticks, and he would walk in the streets in New York and walk in the streets in LA as Mudman. Amazing performance artist. He was great. And just the raw emotional presence, even in the photographs, he carries with him the heartbreak of war. And one of his really famous pieces is a piece where he shoots 3 rats in the artwork, in the performance. And he spoke in LA recently, and there was a lot of people that came to see him speak, and a lot of people were really angry about the rats. And he was like, yeah, but every single one of you asks a soldier to go and kill other people. But we're so trained to empathize, not with other human beings, but with animals. So there's all this uproar that I killed 3 rats in 1970, whatever, but yet we're all asking our fellow men to go and kill in our name. And that's much more serious, which I thought was a beautiful piece. Let's see. I'm gonna fly through because we have quite a lot to. Okay, so this is one of my favorite pieces in the entire book. Stephen Kohler, also part of the boys' school, he went to Japan and saw these paper-making villages that were becoming obsolete because of the young generations. There was no money in the amount of work. It wasn't worth staying and making paper, but they were ancient paper-making villages that had the mills and the mashing, everything made by the river. I mean, the entire infrastructure, but they were becoming, it was obsolete. No one was using them. So he moved to one and relearned the ancient paper-making techniques and kind of revived it in this area. And as an artist, also made these kind of artwork. The paper is an artwork. And this piece is very delicate, but it's so beautiful that you just have to, it's gonna take a little bit of time. And I'll move on, but keep passing it along. And it says, you know what, maybe what I'll do is I'll read it, because then you don't have to read it, you can just touch it. It's based on a fairy tale, and it's interesting because a lot of these works, there's a process, there's a tactile process in opening them. So it also deals with our relationship with time. It forces you into a sense of intimacy with our artworks, and also takes you out of time and space, which is the idea of the labyrinth. as well. So that's part of the kind of mystic idea of the book. So you open it, and on the back it says, "Open this envelope and you will age within seconds. You were my guest in the palace at the bottom of the ocean. You came here because you saved my turtle when your comrades tortured it on the beach. As a reward, I asked my armored servant to take you on its back into the waves, diving through the deep sea to my home. You are still light, a kid, not even 10. The turtle said, "I was glad you came because I'm bored. We invented games no one has ever played before. You wanted to go home, back to your parents, friends, and village by the shore, yet I asked you to stay for another day and another day. I knew that once you would have left, I would sink back into the gray mud of boredom again. But after a week, I had to let you go. Now back in your village, you feel lonely, don't you? Your parents are dead, your friends walk on 3 legs and have almost no teeth, yet you are not even 10. What did I tell you? A day in my palace makes you 10 years on earth. In case you cannot take it, open this envelope and you will age within seconds." So. Everyone can open it and age within seconds. This is a Italian. She was a concrete poet. I think she lived in Turin. And it says, amor, love, amor, 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 and then in the middle, aquí. And the piece is called Void in the Center. So it's love, 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 to whom? And this is an artist named Julia Lohman, also part of the boys' school, who became my mom's, one of her like lifelong best friends, and who started the Paul Pelosa Museum with Adolf Lichtenberg. And you open it again, and it's the act of opening that's so powerful. And it says love and power, and it's on a tiny napkin. So you open it and you feel a sense of powerlessness and vulnerability just through the materiality of it, that it's this like thin napkin from a cafeteria or something. Again, this is another one of the Italian poets, and it's Chiara Diamanti. And it's, but this rough it's Shakespeare. But this rough magic I here abjure. Now all my charms are overthrown. And overthrown, the line is broken. It's very simple, very beautiful. Oh, take it out of the envelope. Touch it. Be gentle, but it's beautiful. That's the power of it. Oh, and in the middle, because you guys are looking at the Stephen Kohler, it's a miniature starfish from Okinawa.
It's an actual starfish.
It's an actual starfish.
I saw it at the store, but...
Yeah. Eve Ashheim, and she took pages of the Tarot and marked them repetitively. The act of repetition, the act of words. What is a word? What is a book? What is a tomb of knowledge? What, just, if not just a symbol. Lila Raku, she's Palestinian, and in the 90s, if you can imagine, it's a pretty powerful act. She started the first Women's Art Alliance, which is radical in the 90s. And this is a piece she made for the book. It's a platinum print, and it's called The River in the Ocean. And it's just ever so subtle and simple. Again, this is another one of the concrete poets from Italy, Gisela Mayo. And I guess there's this discrepancy because sometimes she, early in her career, called herself a concrete poet and then changed to, I don't really understand that. She changed it. She's not a concrete poet anymore, but this looks like concrete poetry to me. So. And it's called The Emptying of the Page. Again, so these are all of these very subtle, very delicate, humorous attempts at exploring what is truth and what is lies. And the goal of the book is that the territory of what is truth and what is lies changes through your experience of the book. And that maybe we can reclaim it for ourselves. Instead of it being a state of confusion, it's a state of exploration. And again, another woman, Lita Albuquerque, LA, she's LA based, amazing artist. And I mean, it's such a labor of love because by hand she just dotted all of the constellations. She did it 80 times. It's the constellations, and then she just drew on each of them. Do you guys have any, that's the first book, so do you have any questions so far? Any ideas or comments?
So how does a piece of artwork get fetishized? Like if we collected this at the special collections, would it be fetishized by that or?
No, I mean, I think it depends. When I think of fetishize, I think I was speaking earlier to Natalia, and I was explaining that since, the book sold, it's in some of the larger museums, I think it's in the New York Public Library, it's in the San Francisco, it's at the Getty, some of these collections, but not nearly what it should be, because at the time, people didn't understand it, and at the time, the artists weren't that famous. You fast forward to now, a lot of these artists are really valued. So to own one of their artworks is valuable. And so I have collectors come and they want to buy the artworks. They want to buy the books, but I know they're not buying them to touch them or it's going to be in a vault somewhere and maybe it'll be sold again in 5 years.
So it's like the focus on the ownership and having.
It's how it's
like
collected. Yeah,
how it's collected.
For me, it's really about how it's collected. If it's collected because it's the love of which most people who deal with libraries, it's love of information, it's love of books, it's love of ideas. That I don't feel that is fetishistic at all. I think that's kind of one of the beauties of modern culture.
Yeah, I kind of like maybe the idea that when you fetishize an art like that, that is the lie, and you don't really understand it.
Yeah, exactly. The work is to transform you somehow. It's to have a conversation with you somehow. And if you're not willing to go there, then it's fetishizing. If you're willing to go there, then it's a conversation. It's an artwork.
We have a collection of concrete poetry in
Oh,
our special
really?
collections by Dick Higgins.
Oh, amazing. You guys have a good, do you have a lot of Fluxus work as well?
It's from his Fluxus
oh, amazing.
time, yes.
So I noticed this is the book 4 out of 80.
Uh-huh.
And did you say there were only 20 or 30 artists?
In this one, I think I can just count. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 20 in this one.
Okay, so they obviously made more books for some.
Cause my mom actually went broke. Like this was totally it. She wasn't wealthy, but I was she in her archives, it had all of her checkbooks and all of the expenditures and, you know, the paper and the postage, and it was really expensive. She was just a like semi-known artist at the time, you know, not so. I still own a lot of the books. I inherited them when she died.
But the intention was that each artist receives
Each artist gets one for
and then
sure.
the remainder would be.
And then hopefully she would get compensated for the money, which I don't think she ever made her money back, but it was okay.
And, sorry,
Oh,
follow
yeah.
to that. It's clear it's kind of hard to keep it in an order. Is there an intended order of each
Yeah,
one?
there is an intended order of each one, and she worked really hard to make an order because it's a journey. You know, it is a labyrinth. It's this space that she's kind of the artist and the artworks and Eugenia ultimately are guiding you through. So it takes you, and the order that I'm showing is the order that it's in. So, you know, you go to have Lita, the cosmos at the end, that's intentional. Or to have Adolf Leuchtenberg's piece, with the really subtle, the silver, that's intentional. Like, it's a piece that's very difficult to name. You can't, you know, it's so subtle, so it kind of prepares you for the book and the state of mind that she's hoping the viewer will be in. So I'll go to book 2. And she opens it with poet Daisy Zamora. I don't know if you know who she is. She was a Sandinista. She fought with the Sandinistas. And she was a poet as well. She won, I think, the Pulitzer Prize in like the 90s. And she was married to another poet, George Evans, a California-based poet. And she had been exiled. I think she's Chilean. I mean, not Chilean, she's Nicaraguan. And she'd been exiled during this short period. And she went to live with her sister in a farm. I've been trying to figure out more of this story, and I don't know that much of this story. And I basically have to talk to her and find her to know. But her and her sister made this on the farm, and they just made it with things that they found at the time. So they had really limited resources, and it's a poem by her, and then a few objects from the farm. Oh, you opened it.
You can actually take
Yeah,
this
yeah.
off.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Yeah.
This is very Fluxus.
Yeah, it's all very. She was definitely like really influenced by the Fluxus movement. She grew up around all of those artists, Brecht, Capro. She grew up like they were in her house, in her life. It wasn't anything. It was just part of her day-to-day life. The pieces I'm flipping through are also really beautiful, but we don't have time for all of them. Lisa Adams, it's kind of simple. The origin of the lie, the brain, basic and simple. George Evans, who is the husband of Daisy Zamora, and he was a Vietnam vet as well. So a lot of his poems are based around his experiences in Vietnam. It's a little bit gruesome, I'll just warn you. But they're beautiful poems and a beautiful artwork. This one is an LA artist named Katie Hoffman. And he's a master painter from Vienna. I forget his name, but she fell in love with him. He was her professor, and she fell in love with him. And she painted him every day for like, I don't know, 3 weeks for the book. And each painting is identical, but it's slightly different to do with just her, relationship in the act of making an object. Eve Solomon, she's a New York painter. And I mean, it's really subtle the way this would deal with truth and lies. It's not anything literal. It's to do with seeing. Okay, I'll be. Let me see. Lydia Fabian, you put this up against the light. You have to. Each person would have to find the light, but it's the form of a woman in the form of a man. Simple lie. You have to hold it to the light. Edgar Arsenault, who was she was his mentor. And he's become super famous since. And this is when he was just beginning. He was a young black artist, and this has to do with identity and blackness.
Did she get the paper or did the artist get the paper?
Sometimes she would get the paper and sometimes the artist would get the paper. Like with Edgar, I think he asked her for the paper, so she would go and find it for him. A lot of the times in the correspondence, I found the artist asking for help to find the paper. So a lot of the times she was actually going and finding it. Then we get to book 3, and a bookbinder, a bookmaker named Carolee Campbell. She has a press called Ninja Press, and she's amazing. It's all hand-lettered press. Again, they're all labors of love. She chooses one book or one poem a year, and it's an artwork. So at this point, it's become more. It's a tomb at this point, and it's in our world. This is real. This makes it more real, So it was at this point started to be taken more seriously than when it was this. And her goal for the 4th book was to even make it more serious. And we were talking about, she loved, she was like this voracious reader. She could read 2 books a day, like in her free time after work, after the studio, come home and like she'd eat these thrillers. She loved like really stupid thriller novels, like female heroines. And so we were talking about making the 4th book like a suitcase, like a briefcase. So it even plays more into the idea of this kind of secret weapon to deal with how to navigate through the culture. Michael Mcmillian, again, California-based artist, and it's a carnival ticket that he made. It's all made by hand. Lynn Aldrich, she's a conceptual artist, and it's made with carbon paper, so it's toying with words and it's toying with ideas because she's making the cosmos, the galaxy, but with carbon paper, which is carbon, so it's this pen. Tom Marioni, who was a contemporary of my mom's, early conceptual artist, and he just uses the emblem pi. I don't think we need to touch that one, but it's interesting. And then one of my favorite pieces is this artist, John Outerbridge, who's become very famous now. And he was a bus driver. He was part of the Chicago Art Ensemble. I don't know if you know who they are, music, kind of jazz, early jazz. And he was really, he's constantly working. One of my favorite stories about John is he got invited to the Brazilian Biennial, and he was the only Black artist. And he arrived there, it was in Rio, or in Sao Paulo. It was in the 90s. And they gave him the room, they were walking into his room, and they gave him the room, the furthest in the furthest corner. And he was like, what am I gonna do with this? And so, and also when you are an artist in one of these biennials, that you got your own security guard because they had said it was so dangerous. And he instantly got rid of the security guard and made art. Oh, you open it. They're all miniature artworks. So much time, so much. And he collaborated with all these kids at in Sao Paulo to make this artwork. And he made this piece with yams, and the yams started growing. And it became this huge sensation where, I guess in their local Santeria, it looks like a shrine, a Santeria shrine. So all these high priests started coming, it crossed over, and all these priests started coming and doing, worshiping at the Sao Paulo Biennial in his room. And it became the most famous piece. And he's finally become recognized, and he's which makes me so happy because he deserves it so much. But it's amazing, just the love and the time that goes into making those little boxes. I actually helped make the boxes because he was like, I'm not going to have time, and so I went and helped him. This is a piece that me and my mom did. We worked a lot together. My mom was my art teacher. I didn't graduate high school. My mom taught me anything I know. So much of what I know I had learned from my mom. And she actually asked me not to go to art school as an artist because she taught in art schools and she found them so distasteful. The kind of, at the time it was all about how to market yourself, and and she would teach art history, the situationists, the fluxus, their performance, and the kids weren't interested. They wanted to know how to become famous and how to market themselves, and she was so disillusioned. She's just, you don't need to go to art school. Just make art and you'll be fine. Luckily, I've been fine, so. But we dealt a lot together with the idea of abuse and pain and trauma, and how do you deal with it through generations. And so this piece is about that. And we went and printed at this place, Gemini Gel, and it's a photo of electrons and protons and neutrons. And it's just about the only way that we're gonna kind of have a vision, we all have blind spots, and so we need each other to find our blind spots. That's the only way that we're gonna navigate through our own blind spots, is together. And it's also meant to hold that to the light. Sam Ehrenberg, again, another conceptual artist. He worked with James Lee Byers a lot, and it'll become apparent what it is. It's, again, the act of opening, the act of touching, all of these intimate acts. It's the work is not meant to be so precious. Benji Whalen, he's San Francisco based, and he hand embroidered each one, and each one is different. And they're acts of violence as consolations. This is Seth Hoffman, who is a friend of my mom's, and they were always fighting. They were really good friends, but they were always fighting. And his piece, you can't see it, you have to hold it to see it. It says, once again, let's see, by participating in the Book of Lies, Volume 3, I am a loser. For once again, I have wasted my time and resources in the name of art. And I remember the day he handed it to my mom, and she was so mad at him. She said, I can't believe you did this, you're such an ass. And she was mad for like a week, and she wouldn't speak to him. And then she was driving, and she was like, it's a joke. I didn't get it. It's a lie. Like, she was so invested. William Wiley, he was also, the painter. So he was one of my mom's heroes. He showed with my grandmother as well. He did an amazing sculpture, one of my favorite I've ever seen, and it was called The Black Ball of Violence. It was in 1968 when Martin Luther King was killed. He was taking down a show in San Francisco, and he had some electrical tape, and it was playing on the radio, the reports, and he just kept rolling the tape, this electrical tape, and kept just as an emotional response to the pain, and didn't know what to do. And it became an artwork, and it had tape, and so every time it was shown, people would add to the ball of violence, and it was this cumulative act of dealing with the trauma of Martin Luther King's death, and was he killed, but what is it when our heroes become killed? And so he said he would do the piece for my mom. He sent her a piece, and she was like, no, it's not handmade, there's no love in it, and you have to do it over. And I was like, that's your hero, like, you're being so rude to him. And he did it. He redid the piece and made this beautiful artwork for the book, and each one is different.
Yeah, he made those big paintings with lots of things
I
coming
love
in
them.
there.
Yeah.
Those too.
He's one of my favorites. And for the show on my grandmother, when I went and interviewed all the artists, I had to interview him. And it was interesting because one day I would be with Baldessari, and then the next day I would be with him, and I got this perspective of mostly all men. My mom was the only female that showed with my grandmother, but it's all men that had lived their lives according to their own kind of dictates as artists. But you have the man that the culture emulates and loves, which is Baldessari, he lives in his own factory. His house is an art factory, and he's bought all the buildings next to his house, and he has crews of young people making his art, and he's kind of stressed out all the time. He stopped drinking. But then you go 500 miles away up in the mountains to Bill Wiley's farm. He lives by the river. He kind of dropped out. He still is successful enough that he lives on his art. He paints every day in the same house he's lived in his entire life. And you couldn't help but be like, what is success? You know, Baldessari has this one model of success, but then Bill Wiley has this alternate model of success. And personally, Bill Wiley seems a lot happier. He fishes, he writes poetry, he makes music. He's got very close relationships with his family. Baldessari is an amazing artist, but what is art if it's not life? So, this is another artist, Marvin Hardin, from the 60s. And one of these bones is painted and one is real. And I don't know which is which. And we'll end with this one, Rhonda Sabanoff. It's very simple and beautiful. And it's a little car in the darkness trying to find the light, you know, creating the light with its headlights, which is kind of all, all we are. So. Do you guys have any more questions? Any comments?
So is the goal of a conceptual artist to be successful?
Oh, I can't say what the goal of a conceptual artist is. I mean, but I think the goal that, like, the textbook idea of conceptual art is, it's not even, I don't think there's a goal, but the thrust behind it is renaming what is art. Art isn't an object. Art isn't a thing. Art is like if art has this domain over the other, we have our lives with all of the stuff that's already preformed for us, and then there's the world of art that's allowed to live in this kind of more nebulous state. You know, it's easy, like if I'm at the airport and they're like, "What are you doing? Well, look at all the places you do," or "What is this crazy thing you're carrying?" And I say, "It's art." They're like, "Oh, okay." It's like this magic word that you can just do anything.
You get a pass.
You get a pass. It's a cultural pass with art. And so over this century, they've been expanding. Artists have been expanding and expanding and expanding. What is art? It's not an object anymore. It's not even a. It's not even it's if it makes you question. It's what it does to the viewer. It's asking the viewer to understand that the very act of stepping outside the norm is an artwork, and that it's open for everybody.
Art is as art does.
Yeah.
This is your mother's work. What does your work look like?
My work is, I do environments mostly. Like right now I'm working on an environment with the artist Barbara Smith that I was talking about. It's a small show that we're doing for, she's one of my heroes, so when she asked me to work with her, I was like, yeah, definitely. Like, I was so happy. I'm making a land of the mothers, an installation that's like the land of the mothers that you sit in, and it's going to have a video of hers in it. So I've been thinking, what does the land of the mothers look like? And I'm building it at home. It's got like latex and feathers and light and big silk rocks and a stream, like not a real stream, like corrugated metal stream. That's what I'm working on right now.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm lucky. I feel so lucky to be able to make art. Any other questions?
This is perfect to be able to touch.
It's
Thank
so
you.
important.
Yes.
Thank you guys. I'm really happy. I love seeing it messy. Because when I was thinking like I was going to do this, I was like, I don't know how to do that. This is what I know how to do. So. Any other comments or questions?
So how often do you do this?
I do it for, if someone wants to see the book. I've never taken it outside of California, but there'll be people who are really interested in the book, and I'll give them the explanation, but I demand hours. I'm like, you can't come unless you have 3 hours. You can't be in a hurry. You have to take your time. I've done it now probably 30 or 40 times, but this is the first time I've done it for an audience that wasn't already familiar with my mom's work. And I'm so happy to get the opportunity. And it's forced me to become more intimate with the work. Like I said, I'm learning so much going through these archives. I didn't know this was a magic spell. I had no idea that that's what she was thinking, or that she was likening the piece to a labyrinth. And it's interesting because in the quotes, there was this man named Maurice Berger.
Oh.
And I was
He's
like,
one of us.
I know, and I was like, who's Maurice Berger? So I looked it up on the internet, and it said, and it was like, he teaches at UC, he teaches here. So I called, and I was like, hi, can I speak to Maurice Berger? And they're like, who is this? I was like, well, actually, and I mean, it's such a cute, he's gone, but it's, so, I mean, there's all of these places that cross. When you're doing the right thing, I think that happens. But his writing about labyrinths is so beautiful. I wasn't familiar. And he writes about labyrinths and conceptual art, and the idea of creating these constructs that are like these paths of discovery.
We're working on a project with Maurice and Marvin Heifferman, his partner, related to the sciences at UMBC.
Oh, really? Oh, that sounds wonderful. Oh, that's something I do too, is I work with the sciences a lot with conversations. Like, I did a talk at MoCA recently. Like, I've been, part of my work is my own art making, and then part is, my mom's not known enough, and it's strange because my mom gets known, the more I'm out in the world, the more my mom gets known. So sometimes I don't want to be in the world and be playing that role, but I would do it in a second for my mom because her work, and she was a prolific artist as well, but the conversations, I get asked to do them, and I'm not interested in those conversations to replicate them, so I do them with science. I did one with these neural headsets recently where we asked the question of what do ideas look like? We have neuroscientists and artists and architects, all the disciplines, and we put the headsets on, and then we have these big projector and these MIT guys that do the computers, and somehow they make it so you see on a huge screen, each person is a color, and you see the activity of the brain so you see the conversation as an artwork, a living artwork. So you see the activity and the restfulness, and how people who are confused, their like little dot goes out here and doesn't do much, or people who are really engaged, their dots are like this. And it's so powerful it's trying to broaden again the ideas of what is an idea? What does an idea look like? Like our echoes go so far. I mean, we were talking about it at lunch, that science is going so far beyond all of these kind of conceptual studies. Like they're beyond spirituality. They're like so far out there. At that talk, this neurophysicist was saying that reality doesn't exist, is what they're learning. That it's a holograph, that it's a coping mechanism. And it was so upsetting to the architect that was there. He left the conversation. And the artist as well. I mean, yeah. He was like, what? My whole life is about form, and you're telling me form doesn't exist. And it's like, it was really interesting because we're like, this is what we have. We have to come to understand that the sciences are leading the way in creativity in a way. Yeah.
But within certain parameters, this is their box.
Right. Well, there's a lot of right now it's so popular for science. So I'm actually working with her, the woman who did the neuroscientist on another piece. Like, we got along so well. We're like, oh, let's work on an artwork together. So, yeah.
We have a reception if all of you would like to join us. And you can talk and ask more questions if you have them.
Thank you.